one way that a lot of superintendents irrigate is just visual. You know your golf course. You can see when grass is drying out. You know when things need to water. These in-ground sensors identify those areas before we would ever see it. Computers can irrigate much better than a human can once it can all talk to each other. And I see that as maybe the next wave of irrigation. The challenge is right now there's not really a way for those sensors to physically control the irrigation computer.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Fiella, and welcome to another episode of the Golf Sustainability Podcast. I had the good fortune of meeting our guest, David Robinson, the Senior Director of Golf Grounds at Marriott, at the AA conference this past winter. And I was sitting in on an instructional tour that he was giving, and he talked about the notion of the irrigation system of the future, which really captured my interest. And it's a great pleasure and a real privilege to be able to welcome David today to the Golf Sustainability Podcast. He's responsible for a worldwide portfolio of over 50 golf courses all over the world. As a result, he's got an extremely unique perspective on the world of sustainable golf. And as I said, he's a real visionary that has a sense for kind of where things are headed with the future of golf course management. David, welcome to the Golf Sustainability Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start by having you tell us a little about your career journey and your current role at Marriott Golf.
Sure. So I've been with Marriott for almost 23 years. I can't take all the credit. Thank you for those kind words in the intro, but I work with a team here that myself and one other individual, we're both agronomists with the company, and we oversee all of our courses globally. So it definitely keeps us busy. We've got, like you said, over 50 golf courses thrown all throughout the United States, all the way around the globe to Fiji and New Caledonia and everywhere in between. So as you can imagine, we've got every type of turfgrass, every climatic region, every probably, age of system that you can imagine. So it definitely keeps things interesting and keeps us busy. I've been in the turf industry for, 35 years or so. Have my degrees from a small college in North Florida, and then my bachelor's degree from Penn State University. And our office is here in Orlando, although I like to tell people most of the time my office is about 35,000 feet somewhere sitting on an airplane. I just got back from Tennessee last night visiting a couple of our properties that we have there that both are in some level of trying to get an irrigation renovation done at both their courses. So very, very timely for our discussion today.
Great. Well, you're a true road warrior, and aren't too many people that have responsibility for a global portfolio. Give us an overview of Marriott Golf's global operations.
Sure. So we've been around, we're a department of Marriott International hotel company. We've been around as a golf division for over 50 years. Started out here in the United States, Camelback out in Arizona. I'm sure many of your listeners have been there. That was our very first golf course that we acquired back, over 50 years ago, and just grew from there. And like I said, now we've got about 42 facilities with over 50 golf courses spread out all over throughout the United States and Central America, South America, Caribbean, United Kingdom, Spain, the list goes on and on. We're just spread out all over the place and growing. We've got a couple new projects, or a few of them actually, Bahamas, Saudi Arabia, Vietnam. So it keeps us busy for sure.
Yeah. I've been reading Vietnam is really a hot development market.
Yeah, a lot of golf development there right now.
Haven't had a chance to play golf yet in Saudi Arabia, but I do look forward to it.
Yeah.
So what does sustainability mean at Marriott Golf? How does it fit into Marriott's broader corporate sustainability strategy?
Sure. So, sustainability is one of those terms that I think you ask a lot of different people, you get a lot of different answers. I think in my head, I like to look at sustainability as, if I looked at one of our golf courses 100 years from now, I hope it's better than it was before we acquired the land and built a golf course on it. Marriott International has some really lofty sustainability goals. We've talked a little bit about, carbon footprint analysis and reduction, obviously water consumption reduction. All of our golf courses here in the U.S., we've got a couple of them that are currently working on Audubon certified, but for the last 20 years, kind of our standard has been Audubon certification. We've spread that around the globe with other golf courses, and a big portion of certification through that process is looking at your water quality and water consumption. So we're constantly updating that with new goals. We're trying to figure out better ways to utilize that. As you can imagine, as a company, we use a lot of water, not just in golf, but, flushing toilets in 9,000 hotels around the world and all the water that consumes. So it's something that we take serious and look at it constantly. Have a team of people at our corporate office that does nothing but that. And golf, I think, aligns really well with those initiatives. Our biggest one that I mentioned that we're looking at now is carbon footprinting, and our net carbon footprint. We've done some analysis of that in the past, but we're getting ready to delve into that even deeper. We as a company have a goal to be net carbon zero by the year 2050. So that's a pretty lofty goal, and golf will just be a piece of that.
Well, you led into the next thing I wanted to talk about perfectly, which is, I wanted to get maybe a little more detail on some of the initiatives that you're pursuing. Let's start with this carbon footprint area. Maybe you want to expand on that initiative a little further, and then maybe we'll talk in a little more detail around what you're doing in the area of water management on the courses.
So a number of years ago, we actually, one of our close partners is Syngenta, and Syngenta came up with a carbon calculation tool that we basically rolled out at all of our domestic properties. And we went through about three different calculations over a period of time, and got some really good information. As you can imagine, when you look at our carbon footprint at, say, a desert golf course, it's going to be much, much higher than a golf course that's surrounded by woods, or, obviously it's dependent on the amount of acreage that you have. So we really got a lot of good information with that, and came up with some best management practices that our properties could use to start lowering that carbon footprint. This go around, we're just now rolling out kind of a beta test of this. We're using GEO, Golf Environment Organization out of Scotland. We're going to use their carbon footprint calculator, which is quite a bit newer than the one that Syngenta had. We're hoping that, since that round of calculations were done, the technology's gotten a little bit better. But we'll do another round. This time we're hoping to eventually do every one of our golf courses globally, not just here in the U.S., which is a pretty big initiative. And kind of the same goals. Let's see where we are. Let's see what we're doing. Let's update our best management practices and understand how we can reduce the footprint. I mean, my goal is not to be zero, obviously, everywhere. I think that's probably unattainable, at least at this point, but certainly figure out where we are and figure out how we can reduce that at the end. So like I said, we're just really launching that. Our first golf course is set to go through that calculation with GEO, hopefully by the end of the year, and then we'll just go from there.
That's great. Well, look, you're, as we've talked previously, I'm kind of new to the golf industry, but I spent close to 20 years in corporate sustainability and very familiar with what large global companies have done to work on reducing their carbon emissions. And that first step is always getting the baseline read, because it very much becomes a data game after that. And right. I think, selecting the right tool and the right platform to measure with is really important. And I think you made a good choice with the GEO platform. Yeah, I mean, to the best of my knowledge, they're the most sophisticated, function-specific platform for the golf industry. So I'm really impressed with the things they're doing, and we've had John Smith on the show. So it'll be really interesting to see. And, there aren't too many organizations doing this carbon footprint work. So you're on the cutting edge there here in the States, and I'll look forward to hearing more about that. How about on the water management side? Can you maybe give us a little more detail on some of the initiatives that you're working on there, David?
As you can imagine, like I mentioned, as a company, we've been analyzing our water consumption for quite a few years. I mean, a lot more years than we've probably actually kind of officially been doing it.
Right.
But here in golf, I would say we really started focusing on our water usage probably around the time that we started getting all of our courses Audubon certified. It was a big piece of that process. And that was probably about the time where a lot of places really started focusing on the water that they're using and how they could reduce that. So it's been a lot of years that we've been looking at that, and I think we've made some good headway. If you look at it, it's always kind of hard to compare year over year with water consumption. We lose properties, we pick up properties. Weather patterns are so drastically different, and in most regions, it's really hard to compare. But I think if you look at our core group of courses that we've had for many years, we're definitely watering less than we used to, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. I think our managers have gotten better. Our systems have gotten better. We've reduced irrigated acreage at a lot of courses. And we success is never final, as they say, right? We'll continue to reevaluate what we're doing, and technology is certainly not going to stop. We're going to keep getting better and better. And, obviously we're always going to need to use water. I'm not sure if we'll ever find a turf grass that doesn't need any water, but it is pretty amazing when you look at some of the technology out there with the turf breeders around the country. That's another piece of the puzzle, that there's some, especially Bermuda grasses and cool season grasses as well, that are being bred that use much, much less water than some of the turf grasses that are currently out in the market today. So, you add all that kind of stuff together, and it really adds up to a lot.
Yeah. In speaking to the USGA Green Section, I mean, they invest millions every year in research, as you know, and they have universities do the research. And I would say the majority of the research those universities are doing are around different turf grasses, and the goal of finding grasses that require less water is certainly a big part of what they're doing. So that, combined with technology, combined with more efficient systems, I think all of those pieces play a role, as you said. What are some of the challenges that you face trying to manage a global portfolio of courses that are so geographically diverse, that deal in so many different climates?
Yeah, I kind of like to look at challenges as opportunities, right? Every quote unquote challenge is something that hopefully allows us to get better. But, I don't know if there's that much of a different challenge between our 3 golf courses here in Orlando as opposed to if you look at from here to Fiji. Yeah, they're different places, but they're a golf course that's across the street from another one is just as different as one that's around the globe. Obviously we have challenges with, different rules, and there's different products that are available. But at the end of the day, grass is grass. It doesn't really know where it is. Bermuda grass here is the same as Bermuda grass someplace else. It's just a little bit different climate. It can be a different soil, different age, so there's an unlimited amount of challenges that come with it. And, having a role like myself and my colleague, I guess the biggest challenge is kind of keeping track of all of it. It's a big marble we live on, and there's a lot going on around there at any given time. But it keeps it interesting. It keeps it fun, and it keeps it challenging to learn new things.
Do you have an opportunity to take things that you learn in one region and apply it in another? And how do you go about trying to transfer information from one region to the next? We
try to get our superintendents together as much as possible. As you can imagine, bringing everybody together around the globe can be difficult, but we have routine conference calls with properties to talk through best practices. We do get our properties together once a year. We don't pull everybody globally together, but the ones that can come, we talk agronomics, talk leadership, talk business, talk everything, and try to do more some regional stuff where we'll pull like our Arizona and California superintendents together and sit around a table and talk about what they do. We certainly promote, our team members to share, practices. We've got kind of a best management practice email thread that if someone comes up with a good idea, they come across something great, they can send that out to every one of our superintendents globally. So that's something we probably don't utilize that as much as we should, but it definitely is a good way to share that sort of thing.
That's a great idea. And the fact, you've got so many courses west of the Rockies that deal with water issues and water restrictions, that having them in a position to share information and ideas and results specifically on that area of water management has to be a real advantage and opportunity. I'd like to refer to sustainability as a team sport. Tell us about some of the partnerships and alliances that you've got with outside groups, suppliers,
Sure.
associations that you're engaging with to advance sustainable golf at Marriott.
We've had a long running relationship with both Toro and Rainbird. We've had a good relationship with the Irrigation Association, with, certified golf irrigation auditors, that sort of thing. And, we communicate with them a lot. And I can tell you that probably 99% of what I've learned over the years has been with the assistance of those kind of individuals. There's a lot of people a lot smarter than I am that are out there trying to figure out better ways to do everything. I mean, we're talking a lot about irrigation here, but, it's at the end of the day, they want to sell you a product, but they want to sell you a product that's going to work and a product that's going to be better than what it was, the last time you bought something from them. So I, a lot of the way I think about certainly irrigation has come from me sitting in rooms with, people that this is all they do is think about better ways to do things. And it's always interesting. But yeah, we've had a lot of really good relationships for a long time with companies in every sector of the turf industry. And they've been extremely important in helping us grow and figure out better ways to do things.
That kind of leads very naturally to, talking about the future. And as I mentioned at the Open, when you and I first met, you were talking about, my recollection is that you said, hey, irrigation really hasn't changed that much in the last 50 years, and we need this to evolve dramatically to improve the state of the art. What's your vision, David, for the future of golf course irrigation?
I think it has and it hasn't grown a lot. Like I think I mentioned, we still pump water through pipes and we send it out on a nozzle that throws it out over the air and hope that most of it lands where we want it to go, right? I mean, that's kind of the basics of irrigation. Now, if you look at when I started in my corporate role 20 years ago, we still had properties that had night watermen, people that would drive around the golf course at night and physically turn on water and, hopefully they got back in 10 or 15 minutes to turn it off and turn on something else. But you knew that probably didn't happen, as accurately as a computer could do. So if you look at, where technology has taken us with computerized irrigation systems and weather stations and in-ground sensors and just, head technology that's much more precise in throwing water, we've come a long way. But we're still just doing it the way that we've done it for 100 years or more. There's a long way to go. I mean, we've got a property here in Orlando that probably for about the 5 years has a tee that's 99.9% irrigated from below. It has a vault system to where it fills up the water and then the water kind of migrates up into the root zone. And the only time we have to run overhead irrigation is if we apply a product that has to be watered in or we put seed out that has to be watered. But, just the day-to-day watering of that tee box is done from underneath. So that obviously saves a tremendous amount of water. Now, that's one single tee on a golf course. Now, whether that technology could be applied to bigger surfaces, I know they've done it on greens. They've done it on bigger tees, whether it could be something similar to that used on fairways and rough, which is where we really use the bulk of our water. Time will tell. One of the things that I've kind of focused on, over the last several years or so is with the in-ground sensor technology. And at the end of the day, we may find a better way to do it, but these in-ground sensors can give us some really good information. One way that a lot of superintendents irrigate is just visual. You know your golf course, you can see when grass is drying out, when things need to water. But a lot of what technology can do is identify those areas before we would ever see it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a pilot. I use the pilot analogy a lot that, there's autopilots that fly planes because the autopilot can do it a lot better than a human can. Computers can irrigate much better than a human can once it can all talk to each other. And, I used to think that in order for that to happen, you'd need 2,000 sensors around a golf course. And then someone a lot smarter than me one time started talking about the fact that there's probably only 3 or 4 different soil types on most golf courses.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of changed the way that I thought. And it's probably true. I mean, every golf course that I've ever managed, you've got your areas that get hot really frequently. You've got your areas that you don't ever have to run irrigation on because they're wet. And then you've kind of got everything else. So it really got me thinking, if I had sensors in those 3 types of areas, maybe a few representative areas for each, and then ran off of what those sensors were telling, I could put the golf course on kind of autopilot, so to speak. And I would just be the pilot sitting in the cockpit, making sure that everything stayed good. And at the end of the day, the plane's going to fly itself a lot better than I could. So I see that as maybe the next wave of irrigation. The challenge is, and we kind of talked about this earlier, is right now there's not really a way for those sensors to physically control the irrigation computer. It gives you all the data, and then you have to take that data and look at it and decipher it and then decide, okay, what do I want it to run? I want it to just make that decision for me. And now, obviously, you're going to have to be there and you're going to tweak it and everything. But my brain is wrapped around that being kind of as the next step. And we're getting there. There's a lot of commercial irrigation that's already being run that way. We just haven't quite got there with golf. But I think we're pretty close.
It's more about automation to where this is done it's controlled automatically, computer driven. Sensors play a big role in that. You get to at the GCSAA show, when I saw those SPIO sensors, I was really intrigued by that. But the more I talked to people, the more I learned, exactly as you said, there isn't that connectivity or interoperability between the sensors and the irrigation systems and the other tools that are needed to kind of bring the vision that you've described to light. But I think it's a compelling vision that makes a world of sense.
It's a really neat time if you really look at the golf technology side of what we do. There's some fantastic companies out there that are coming up with different technologies that are just amazing. You go to the show like we did in Phoenix this year, and you're always, you always run across something that's newer, better. But I step back and I say all this is great, but at the end of the day, I don't want a superintendent that has to sit in their office and decipher that kind of information. I want that information to make those decisions. And I have this conversation quite frequently. And to be quite honest, a lot of superintendents it's going to be tough to let a computer run things. We're so used to, I think, being in control of that ourselves that, it's, and I'm not saying that you're going to, run a golf course sitting at home. I think you still are going to have to be out there. We're a long way away from having planes fly themselves without pilots in the cockpit, although there's cars in Phoenix driving themselves all over the place without a driver. So we may be closer than you think, but that I think we've got to take the human factor out of it, because as good of an irrigators as we are, and I do think that we do it really well, as long as we're making those decisions, I think we tend to err on the side of caution, which typically means a little more water. You don't want the golf course to dry out on a Sunday afternoon while you're home watching football. So you might run a little bit more water the night before, and that little bit more water over the course of, years and thousands of golf courses can add up to a lot of water.
Yeah. Fascinating. I mean, when I think back to the GSAA show and a couple of other sessions I sat in on, they were talking about technologies related to the self-driving sprayers that are spreading,
Yep.
chemicals and fertilizers. And then you've got the autonomous mowers. So, this vision of sensors and automation that got to the point where sprinklers are getting set on and off as needed and sprayers are pulling out of the garage as needed. And that's almost the Jetsons like
All right,
vision
it is.
of golf course management.
Yeah.
And we're obviously a long way from that, if ever being able to get to it. But a key thing you brought up, David, that's interesting is that human factor, because, and I've seen it in the retail industry, I've seen it in other markets. The technology can be there and it can work, but then implementing it takes a considerable amount of time. So
Right.
You've got the time associated with the technology being available, and then you've got the time associated with adoption that puts this, a ways off, but the pieces are starting to fall into place. So it is a compelling vision.
And I think it can have a bigger impact than most think. I mean, I look at, over the years, I've let a lot of grass get dry. And, normally what do you do when that happens? You have to pump a lot of water on it to get it green. And, you're talking probably in most cases, you've let that irrigation go by maybe a day. And so visually, we just can't detect a lot of this stuff. So, when you've got this technology that can detect a dry spot before the human eye could ever detect it, you could prevent a lot of overwatering to try to play catch up after something happens. So, that's going to have a huge impact on the way we do things, no doubt.
Yeah. And then that's where the drones come in. You sit there and send the drone out, and, the drone's name is Jerry. Hey, Jerry, go check the course out for me. And they're feeding back those spots.
That's a great example of we've got this technology that can, a infrared camera can detect when an area is dry.
Yeah.
Sometimes days before it actually shows the symptoms of being dry. Yet I've got to sit down. If I have one of those drones, I've got to sit down and analyze that. I'm looking forward to the day to where that drone wakes itself up every day, flies the golf course, downloads that information into the irrigation computer, and then that, along with in-ground sensors, along with the weather station, along with all the other data that it's being filled, makes the decision on what it needs to irrigate that night. And then again, I'm just sitting back making sure that we didn't lose power, and everything didn't run, and then, or whatever, and everything's working the way it should work. And in my head, I think if we can get there, it's got to save water. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to make our courses better. It's going to make the turf grass healthier. And, and again, we run a business. Most golf is a business, and every drop of water that we run costs money, whether it's, even if we're getting the water for free, which isn't the case in most places, we still have to pay the electricity to pump the water. And we've got to, manage the repercussions of what that water could equate to down the road. So there's a cost to it. And, the more we have to spend, the less money we make, so.
Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up, right? Because in sustainability, from my experience, when sustainability first becomes a thing, there are so many people who think that sustainability, it's going to cost me money. The ultimate success of sustainability is in financial sustainability, because if you're using less water, you're using less chemicals, your labor costs are coming down, your profits are going to go up. So kind of being green makes green, if you will. And that's a really important reason that I think people should, look at these opportunities and look at these new technologies, because they can, in fact, enhance your financial results.
It's every aspect of it. I mean, we could have that same conversation with fertilizer applications and pesticide applications. Every time I have to do that, it costs me money. I would love a golf course that I never had to fertilize and never had to spray, anything on. But, that it just doesn't happen. I mean, just like we have to
Yeah.
take vitamins and we have to eat food and we have to, drink water, the plant is no different. But it certainly helps our bottom line if we reduce all those inputs as much as possible.
Yeah. Amen. You touched on a bunch of different technologies during the last part of our conversation. Are there any technologies that you see on the horizon that you're really excited about? I would imagine everybody with a new widget, you're kind of one of the first
Sure.
stops they make. So
Yeah.
kind of what do you see that's coming down the pike that you're excited about?
You kind of alluded to the GPS sprayers and the autonomous. That's a big, big thing. I mean, obviously, we're talking mostly about irrigation today, but, we've had 4 or 5 GPS sprayers at some of our properties over the last probably 4 or 5 years. And, that not only does it significantly reduce your chances of mistakes, operator error, but it does significantly reduce the amount of product that we put down, much more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
When you go spray a green, for instance, it will literally just spray the green, not the collar, not a little bit off of the collar. It sprays exactly what you've told it to spray. And that's another one that I can see, like looking out into the future. If you look at how we apply products to golf courses, for the most part, we spot apply. We only
Mm-hmm.
apply products where the product is needed. And a lot of those products need multiple applications. For instance, like a herbicide to spray to kill a weed. Most won't kill the weed with one application. So, current technology, I go out even with a GPS sprayer and I can spray 1,000 weeds on a golf course in a day. And then 10 days later, 20 days later, whatever the label calls for, I need to go spray those 1,000 weeds a second time. Well,
Mm-hmm.
how do you do that? Like, how do I send my spray tech out and say, I want you to go spray the same exact 1,000 weeds that you sprayed 2 weeks ago? It's impossible. But with this new technology, and they're not quite there yet with GPS sprayers, but I think they're going to be soon, that sprayer can identify every single weed it sprayed 2 weeks ago and go out there and spray those exact same weeds. So you think about how much that could save over time. Because what happens if you don't spray those 1,000 weeds? Maybe you spray 500 of them. Well, those other 500 that didn't get that second application, they come out of their, semi-dormancy state and they're thriving again. So now you're having to start the process over again. So, that I think is a technology that's going to continue to get better and better. We just demoed one of the autonomous fairway units here in Orlando last year at one of our last week at one of our properties.
Right.
And I've probably never been the straightest mower over the years, but these things mow the straightest lines you've ever seen. They don't scalp grass. They don't, take breaks at the comfort station. They get the job done. And, obviously we're not eliminating labor, but we're probably going to reduce some labor. But, that's a technology that I think is going to keep getting better and better. All the big players are in the game. There's a lot of smaller companies that are in. You might have seen I think it was 2 weekends ago, the PGA Tour event that was in Utah. Those fairways were mowed with autonomous fairway mowers. Really cool stuff when you look at that. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to make our golf courses better. It's going to make them more environmentally friendly and help the bottom line, make businesses thrive a little bit more.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for sure. This was a great overview of Marriott Golf, of kind of your background, your vision for the future. And what I'd like to do now is, spend the last few minutes together really talking about you on a personal level, David. What drives you?
Well, I think first and foremost, my family drives me. My wife and 2 daughters, they always make me want to be better at what I do. And, I'm very fortunate to work for a company that I like to look at it maybe kind of, I'm in the golf business, obviously, but working for a company like Marriott, we're in the hospitality industry. Our end game is to help people's lives to get better. We provide what I think is a really great sport for people to get out, get healthier, enjoy being outside, and to be part of a team that does that is pretty satisfying. So it's a great company to work for, great industry to be in. And that's kind of how I look at it. I'm able to go out there and help our properties and our teams, help people live better lives, if you really look at it from a 100,000
Yeah.
foot level. Yeah.
Who has inspired you the most, would you say?
Boy, that's a hard question because there's been so many people. Every time someone asks me that, there's probably one name that pops out as far as my career goes. And Ken Mangum used to be the director of grounds at the Atlanta Athletic Club. Ken's retired from that, but he's still in the turf industry. And I did an internship with him when I was in college at the Atlanta Athletic Club. And, you work at places, you work for different people over the years. And, you tend to hear like a couple people grumbling, oh, the boss said this or he's making me do this. There wasn't one single person that had a bad thing to say about Ken. He was just the greatest guy you'd ever want to work for. And it kind of showed me that, you can really be a nice guy and treat people the right way and get the most out of them. And, I've taken that throughout my career, and I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for that, because if you look at kind of how the pieces fell throughout my career, they've been tracked back to that moment. The reason I worked for Marriott is because I worked for one of the individuals that I worked with at the Atlanta Athletic Club. So, it's such a small industry that, all those kind of things tie in. And I guess other people that inspire me, I do a lot of obstacle course racing, a lot of ultra marathoning. That's kind of crazy stuff, human endurance type stuff. And there's people out there that do some things that are absolutely superhuman. And not that I'm not that, but those kind of people inspire me to test myself to see what I can do, to keep pushing me forward to try new things.
Yeah. So do you run marathons?
Yeah. Well, quote unquote run marathons. I used to literally run marathons. Now I do the kind of the run walk thing. The older I get, the more abuse I can't recover from things as much. So now I do the furthest I've gone is 45 miles on my feet. And there was some running, there was a lot of walking. There were a couple moments where I may have crawled for a little while, but
I'll tell you what, that's a long way, my friend.
It's a long way. Yeah. And a number of years ago, I realized that I'm not going to get any faster, but I can maybe go a little further. So, I try to keep pushing myself. Tomorrow, I actually have a obstacle course race that I'm doing here. I really love obstacle course racing, the Spartan races, that sort of thing. And this one's about an 8-mile with probably about 30 obstacles that, I'm never going to win an event, never going to be on a podium, but my only goal is to try to finish without an ambulance hauling me off, to the hospital. So I set the bar pretty low, but it keeps me moving and I enjoy it. It's something fun to do.
That sounds incredible. I'm sure you know Rhett Evans from the GCSAA.
Yep. Know him really well, yeah.
I had him recently on the show and, had a chance to talk to him about his pursuit to scale Mount Everest. Which, man, you talk about a story. You and him can have a great conversation about that if you haven't already.
He actually came and spoke at one of our GolfCon events where we bring our golf leaders a couple of years ago. And he talked about when he summited Denali and the challenges that he had with that. And then I was out in Monterey earlier this year at an NGCOA function, and he told a story about Everest. So he's another one that inspires me. I mean, I don't do really well in cold, so I'm not sure if I'm going to ever climb Mount Everest, but the perseverance that he has with accomplishing this kind of thing, I think was it the first or second time that he, I think it was the first time he tried to summit Denali. They got stuck up on the mountain. I think it was 7 days where they were basically in a little one-man tent. And the only way to get water was to reach out, grab some snow and let it melt in your hand and drink it. You imagine being in a one-person tent for 7 days? That's a mental toughness.
I can't imagine walking 45 miles. But this obstacle course, marathon, walk, run, however you do it, that's inspiring. And you have made me feel extremely out of weight. And out of shape and overweight right now, I'm going to have you know. So tell us about the greatest challenge that you faced, David.
That's a really tough one to answer. Again, I mean, we've had thousands of challenges, both personally and professionally. And I truly do. I know it kind of probably sounds a little cliche, but I try to look at challenges as opportunities. Most of the time when you work yourself through a challenge, you get better at the end of it. I don't know if I can pick one single challenge. I actually,
Okay.
I kind of look
fair.
forward to having challenges. It makes things interesting. If we woke up every day and everything worked out perfectly, it'd probably get kind of boring, so I think that's one of the things that keeps things interesting. So yeah, that's a hard one to answer.
Well, actually, you gave a great answer, and that is that mindset of embracing challenges, really fascinating, and it's a mindset that has been exhibited by many of the most successful people anywhere. And how do I know this? Well, I had on the show a fellow by the name of Brazos Barber, who's the director of sustainability for the PGA Tour, and young guy. And for some reason, I forget exactly what the connection was, but the topic of stoicism came up. And I don't know from stoicism. So I said, Brazos, tell me about stoicism. What's this about? He goes, oh, it's based on the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, who's, ancient Roman and Greek times. And he says, there's a book I want you to get, and it's called The Obstacle is the Way. So I got it and I read it. And the book is really incredible. And what it just described was that whole point of view of accepting and addressing challenges as neither good nor bad, but just accept them for what they are and figure out a way to deal with it. So embracing obstacles, embracing challenges is a mindset that throughout the book, there's example after example of really great people that have kind of viewed challenges exactly the way you just described.
Sure.
So
yeah. We've obviously talked a lot about water today. If you step back and you think about that, if every single golf course had an unlimited amount of water to use, we wouldn't even be having a conversation right now. But the fact that,
right.
We've been challenged in many parts of the world and most parts of the world to figure out ways to do better, that's making our irrigation practices and our water consumption better. But if we weren't challenged to do that, we would never get better. So, I think it's a good example of how we, as much as we can, I don't want to say despise, but, dislike water restrictions and those type of challenges, it's those things that make us better at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. What, in terms of your legacy, what is it that you'd like to leave behind for future generations, David?
Yeah, when the pandemic hit in 2020, most of our team was furloughed for a pretty lengthy amount of time. And as with many people, there were so many uncertainties. And the one thing that hit me probably the hardest was thinking that I may not be around the people that I'm with all the time. Certainly my team, our superintendents, our golf leaders at our properties everywhere. And so I think at the end of the day, I hope that a little bit of what I've done, over my career has maybe stuck with some people and hopefully made them better at the end of the day. It's to me, it's all about the people. We wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for the people that we surround ourselves with. And, when I retire, if I can look back and hopefully some of the people that I interacted with, hopefully I made their lives a little bit better. And, that's probably the thing that I hope I can say more than anything.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, listen, I could tell just from the limited amount of interaction we've had, I'm sure there are many people that will be talking about you down the road the way you talk about Ken Magnum. And that
would be the ultimate thing, no doubt, because he's about as good as they get.
That's cool. Well, listen, it's been a real privilege to be able to speak with you today, David. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for sharing what you do and what I think is a very exciting vision for the future of a very important part of our industry, and that's water management and irrigation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure talking with you today. I'm humbled by being asked to do this. And if there's any listeners out there that would ever want to reach out to me to talk about this more, I'm always available. Probably tell I like to talk about this sort of thing. So, I'm always willing to have that conversation and help anybody out that I can. So thank you.
That's great. That's a very generous offer. Thanks very much. And to our listeners, thanks very much for joining us again today. And the vision that David has outlined, I think, is not only compelling, but it's reasonable and it's achievable. And it'll be very interesting to see how the industry advances towards realizing the vision that David has outlined. David Robinson is a perfect example of the type of industry leader that we like to bring to you in these conversations on the Golf Sustainability Podcast. If you enjoyed my conversation with David, please subscribe to the podcast, tell your friends and colleagues about it. Keep listening, and you have a great day. I appreciate you. Thanks so much for listening, and so long.